out of our media segment because at this point, with most of our segments that we have, I'm pretty sure like 50% of our content is Marvel content now. I was going through our uploads and I swear to God, every other video is Marvel. Every episode has some type of Marvel in it.
Yeah. Well, let's try to diversify next week because
Uh, we'll have
we'll
Marvel because episode 4.
we'll have Marvel because of episode 4, but I'm sure we can find something else in media to talk about. I have some ideas in mind, but I'm gonna have to push you on that outside of the podcast. For
Yes.
today, let's just move on to our first, not really political segment, but it does deal with politics in a way because it is happening in real life. So, the new patch came out for the coronavirus, and we're seeing some buffs in transmittability. How do
Yeah.
we feel about that and how it'll shake up the meta?
Oh God. So yes, with that very very cringe introduction, we unfortunately have a new variant of the coronavirus, which is more infectious than the Delta variant that we have come to know and tolerate. It's called the Omicron variant, which was first detected in South Africa. Note I say detected, not that it originated from. I think that is a very important distinction. It was detected in South Africa, and that's when we came to realize, oh my God, we have another variant that's powerful, which once again is only happening because people aren't vaccinated, thus the virus is able to expand and become more powerful amongst unvaccinated populations.
Yeah. So, and of course, we have seen the uprise in travel bans. I think a
8
good,
African countries have been banned.
I was about to say 6, but yeah, has it jumped up to 8 now?
I believe it was 7, not including South Africa.
Wow.
So,
But yeah, and then just they had to choose the name Omicron. Really?
I,
I hate to dive into conservative fear mongering, but that is the scariest sounding variant we've had so far.
uh,
Like we've had many variants because of course the original COVID and Delta were the most of concern, but we've had several.
I mean, I want to, it's not the, it's a little bit inaccurate to say the original COVID because COVID had already mutated before it hit the shores of the United States.
Yeah,
Because it had mutated in its travels between China and Europe.
yeah. But really, the only variants of concern that were identified by the WHO was Delta and Omicron.
Yes. The 8 countries that were given travel restrictions were Lesotho, South Africa, Eswatini, Nambia, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Malawi, and Botswana.
I don't even recognize half of those.
Uncultured swine. Anyways,
Like, oh god, I feel bad for the countries who are dealing with that because with them having travel restricted from their countries, like, oh boy.
yeah, and it really sucks because vaccine hesitancy has been going up in the southern African countries. I mean, it was detected in South Africa because of the fact that there is a lot of vaccine hesitancy in the country of South Africa, meaning that because the variant spread, I believe it started in the Netherlands and then spread across the European continent and into the African continent.
Which it's very weird to think about um, vaccine hesitancy outside of the US and other similar countries.
But no, vaccine hesitancy is a universal thing because anti-vax ideas are a universal thing.
Right. Like,
And it may not be rooted in the same conspiracy theories that us Americans and other Western countries have, but other countries and other cultures have their own conspiracy
and the
theories.
reason I say that is because, like, us in America on the left have been combating this anti-vax mentality for the entirety of this pandemic within our own borders.
Yeah,
And so, like, to think of something that isn't associated with, like, not that anti-vax sentiment is associated with QAnon, but QAnon tier mentality,
yeah,
like, permeating the entirety of the conservative movement in the US.
yeah.
It's very weird to think because like only like small segments of QAnon reach other countries.
Yeah, I think it's a big thing to realize is that conspiracism, when based specifically in the global south, is used in the context of potential colonialism by bigger Western powers.
Yeah.
Because there is legitimacy to that with bigger Western powers and China, which is not a Western power, but it still is a huge power, economically and socially influencing their countries for the worse, putting entire countries into debt servitude, or using organizations such as the World Bank or the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, or just how there's a disproportionate representation within the UN, considering the UN Security Council does not have any countries from the global south on its board. So a lot of conspiracies can be based in the fact that it could be Western propaganda used to disrupt their way of life. And I mean, it would make sense that you could use vaccines with that because not only are vaccine hesitancy rising, the fact of the matter is that vaccines were not made readily available to countries in the global south, meaning that it allowed for more conspiracism to rise because not only were people not taking the vaccine, they didn't have enough for it to become, like as pushed as we have it in America. Like in America, you see advertisement everywhere about get vaccinated. You can get vaccinated easy as this. Just walk into your local CVS free of charge. But other countries don't have the luxury of really doing that because they don't have the supply. They don't have the supply to be openly advertising, oh, come and do it, it's free, when what if you show up and there's a line of people and they run out?
Yeah. And another reason why I'm so surprised by anti-vax sentiment around the globe is the fact that it's been mostly first world countries that have been using up all the vaccines.
It's not even that they're using up, they're wasting it. Have you heard of how many vaccines have gone to waste because of the fact that there's a significant number of people that don't want to get vaccinated, meaning
Especially,
you just have them sitting there.
Yeah, especially in conservative states in the U.S. Yeah,
And
it's I mean, this has been an occurrence for the past year ever since I want to say I first heard of vaccines going to waste in. I think it's the vaccine started going out in March to the older population, and then what became available in May in our region. I want to say I started hearing around May or June that vaccines have started going to waste.
I've heard of, what was it? I heard back in April about the potential numbers of waste that was happening. And I was really hoping that we wouldn't reach that, but it's very much looking like we are just wasting a lot of vaccines that very much could be going to,
because
foreign countries.
Because it's probably not an understatement that less than a quarter of vaccines have gone to third world countries.
Yeah, and it's actually really interesting because
I'm not saying that based off of any statistics or anything. I'm just making an assumption based on what I already know, but that is a legitimate conclusion to come to based on all of the data that we've seen.
It's actually really interesting that we're talking about this because I've been watching the show Lost, and that show is absolutely insane. But for one of the characters named Mr. Echo, his backstory is that he is a warlord and drug runner in Nigeria. And one of the things that they peddle through the black market are vaccines because because the supply is just not there to meet the demand. So a bunch of warlords use the prospect of having vaccines as a way of making a profit. And it's really funny to see that in Lost, a show that came out back in 2004, and now be in the year 2021, and seeing that, yeah, that makes sense that a market for vaccines being on the black market would happen, considering we have this massive shortage of vaccines in a lot of the global south and a massive waste of vaccines in the global north.
Yeah, just. But now the thing that immediately comes to mind is how much is this new variant going to be able to pass through currently vaccinated members of society?
I do not know.
I don't think so. Here's what I think. I don't think that we're going to see an uprise in vaccinated individuals dying from the vaccine, or not from the vaccine, but dying from the coronavirus, because I do think because with the original strain, it was almost like 98. I want to say it was the Pfizer or Moderna shot that was 98 to 95% effective.
Pretty sure it was Moderna.
And then we see that one go down with the Delta variant down to the original numbers were 90, but I haven't looked at the statistics since then.
Yeah.
Like with the efficacy rate, it could go down even more, but I don't think it'll go under 50%. I mean, not a doctor here, but the vaccines have seemed pretty effective. I don't know if it's going to completely bypass this current vaccine.
I mean, it all depends. So before we continue about its potential harms with people that aren't vaccinated, we should understand how it came to be. The Omicron variant started in the Netherlands and spread amongst European populations before it came to the African continent, where it was first noticed among South African populations.
Yeah.
And then neighboring countries have potentially seen minor flare-ups. And when I mean minor, I mean potentially just single digits of people with the potential of the Omicron variant. Meaning that the Omicron variant, which was confirmed today to be in the United States via someone in California, probably has been here for a month.
Yeah.
In my opinion, the Omicron variant was probably here in the beginning of November. And we just didn't notice it until South Africa realized that it's a different variant, because we've already had so many people catching the Delta variant through breakthrough that we may not have considered that another variant has sprouted up and is also causing breakthrough.
Yeah.
And so...
And the one thing that people are mentioning a lot is that this one has a higher transmittability. I don't know if there have been an uprise in symptoms. I think if I remember correctly, there have been people losing their sense of smell and taste, but I'm not so sure if I read that correctly. But I do think that a lot of what I've been seeing out in the media is that they've only identified the increased transmittability as the big factor in this new variant.
Yeah. According to Dr. Fauci, that it might be able to avoid protection of the monoclonal antibodies and the convalescent plasma, and if worse comes to worse, it could bypass the antibodies of the vaccine.
Yeah.
Which, God.
That's worst case scenario. I'm still pretty confident in saying that it won't go under 50% efficacy, but people have been wrong before.
Exactly. And the main thing that we really need to discuss, and I feel that this is now becoming more and more evident that we need to do, is that we need to go back to lockdowns. And I really hate that.
Yeah.
But I feel like we have to, because we now have two variants running around that are highly transmissible, that one we know causes breakthrough cases, and another that is currently being hypothesized to potentially cause breakthrough.
And here's the thing that people don't realize, is that in the U.S., upwards of 900 to 1,000 people are dying a day to COVID.
Exactly.
Which, again, obligatory, we're not finished with COVID. We are still deep in this, and I am afraid of another dark winter.
Yeah, I mean, just today, in the location where we live, there's about 1,600 new cases today alone.
Yeah.
And so we are dealing with a pandemic, and I really hate this because I hated the lockdowns. I absolutely despised it. But we may need to go back to lockdowns because of the fact that this will kill people fast. I mean, it's possible that Omicron will just cannibalize the Delta variant.
Oh, like the Delta variant cannibalized the original variant. So that is a very, very solid estimate for sure.
But What if it doesn't?
And we have to deal with both of them?
Yeah, what if it doesn't? That would be terrifying. And we already have a lot
Or
of
you mean you don't think Omicron is going to completely demolish Delta?
Yeah, what if it doesn't? What if we deal with Delta and Omicron?
Yeah.
Because you know that there are variations of the flu that
Yeah.
do not cannibalize each other.
Yeah, because we have to get flu shots every 6 months or every year because it's constantly evolving.
What if we have to do that with COVID?
Yeah.
What if the Omicron and Delta don't cannibalize? They just persist.
And the reason I don't think it's going to happen is conservatives won't let it happen.
The lockdowns?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I know for a fact that we have governors such as Greg Abbott and Ron DeSantis that would sooner die than allow their states to become locked down again. But I would even hazard to say that Democratic governors probably don't want to lock down again either.
Yeah, they probably would lock down if we see like mass uptick in deaths.
I feel like they would lock down if they got significant pressure from the federal government.
I mean, that too.
I don't think...
But let's face it. States like Texas and Florida, they didn't lock down. They did not.
They did, but they didn't lock down as hard as other states, like, say, Massachusetts.
When I say that, I mean in comparison, of course. Yeah. Like, in comparison to, like, states like New York, California, places like that.
Yeah.
They did not lock down.
Yeah.
When you look
you
look at the two extremes, like...
Even when you look at our best states, if you compare them to European countries and how they locked down, we were still paling in comparison.
Right.
And so, I don't think we're going to see a lockdown again, despite my belief that it's necessary. And personally, I think both Democrat and Republican governors are not going to go for it. I feel Democrats will only go for it with significant pressure because it's not a popular position. I don't think liberals want lockdowns.
And especially because our economy is like whenever you turn on the news, the economy is all we're hearing about: hyperinflation, gas prices going up, which I mean is a ludicrous thing to talk about right now, considering we're still in the midst of a pandemic. But that's what's going on. That's what's driving a lot of political talk right now.
Yeah, and the problem also is that we have so many industries, billion-dollar industries at that suffered under the lockdowns, and if a lockdown happens again, they will suffer again. Movie theaters barely hung on by a thread after the recent lockdown. They will probably die if another one happens. Conventions and fairs, and all the different sub-communities of that, like cosplaying as an industry, I believe is worth $5 billion.
And also,
that would go down tremendously if we have another lockdown.
And also imagine, the damage it would do to rent.
I know, rent would be absolutely insane.
Do you remember how much of a fight it was to extend the moratorium on rent?
I know.
Or not on rent, on
evictions.
Evictions, yeah.
And so imagine what would happen if we go back into another lockdown. I genuinely feel...
Would there even be a moratorium this time?
People would fight it. I believe the conservatives in power would fight another moratorium, as they would feel that it wouldn't be necessary to have that if you just stop the lockdown. That was pretty much one of their bigger arguments against having the moratorium to begin with.
Yeah.
And so it would be even harder to restart a lockdown and start another moratorium and start another stimulus set. Yeah. I genuinely feel that this would be bipartisan. I am firmly confident that bipartisan support would come from rejecting lockdowns, rejecting moratoriums, rejecting stimulus. I genuinely believe it would be a bipartisan decision at that, which really sucks because we need this. But I also understand that there are billions, if not trillions of dollars on the line if we go into another lockdown. Entire industries will die. We've seen so many businesses that have just died
And that will only catalyze the monopolization of certain industries. I mean, look at how much Amazon has grown throughout the pandemic.
Exactly.
You can even just see that in Jeff Bezos' net worth growing over the course of the pandemic.
Exactly. I mean, things like corporations that do things such as delivery, such as like Amazon or DoorDash or Uber, they saw massive increases because of the fact that people ordered more. Or streaming services, once again Amazon, but Netflix, Hulu, and now Disney will see massive increases if another lockdown happens again. And those are not necessarily bad things, but it is to say that with that happening, other industries will fail, meaning in-person restaurants that don't offer proper delivery options will fail. Network television that isn't based in streaming can start to see failures. Movie theaters especially will see failures. Of like sporting events will see failures, meaning sports networks will be starved for content, meaning that they will start to see slippage. We will see a lot of just various different things. I mean, entertainment across the board would potentially diminish.
Yeah.
And this is a reality that we're facing, which is basically we're dealing with mass death again, and on almost 100% certainty that we will reach 1 million deaths due to this virus.
Yeah.
Or a complete shutdown of the entire country again, which, in my opinion, I think will lead to a lot more death.
And when you say 1 million deaths, you mean in the U.S.? Because
in the U.S. alone, I'm talking.
Because let's face the fact that in the globe, we have definitely hit the several million mark.
Oh yeah, we have. But in the U.S., we've hit 1 million mark, and I think that
recently, before Omicron, I looked at the stats and we passed 750,000.
Oh yeah, we've passed 750,000 back in late October.
Yeah.
And so the main thing I'm worried about is that if we did another lockdown again, I feel that we would still see an uptick in death.
Yeah.
Because it would be even more bleak.
Because this one is not like more lethal, but the fact that it's more transmissible will lead to more deaths.
I'm not talking about from COVID. If we have another lockdown, I believe more people will commit suicide.
Right.
Because we just came out of a hopeless situation, and unfortunately, and this is really an unfortunate reality, many suicides are done because of financial strain. The enormity of financial strain and how you can feel endlessly trapped and how you feel the only way out is to potentially die to get rid of the debt. Imagine what happens if we have another lockdown. So many Americans will become financially disadvantaged, and the debts will pile up quickly. And if we don't get proper moratoriums, I very much could see many people potentially taking their own lives for, life insurance, potentially, for their families, if it's applicable, or something or the other. I mean, abusive relationships and situations involving abuse will definitely increase as abuse victims will be trapped with their abusers. And we all know how those situations can really end nasty with either the abuser murdering the victim or the victim taking their own lives. Or even sometimes a victim takes the life of their abuser, but that's still death. And that would still contribute to an increase in death and just general unhappiness in the country if we have another lockdown.
Yeah.
Which really, when I describe it like this, it sounds borderline like the precipice of the apocalypse.
Yeah.
It really sounds like we are on the precipice of an apocalypse when you really think of the stakes of how much can go wrong.
Yeah. And internally, or like outside of the podcast, I've been making jokes to my friend groups like, oh yeah, we just escaped the post-apocalypse. Not as exciting as I expected, but happy to make it out alive. We are going to return.
For all we know, that wasn't the apocalypse. That was the calm before the apocalypse. That's the premonition that some person has before the apocalypse, and no one believes him that things are going to get worse, and then it does.
Yeah.
So, I really don't want to be doomer about things, but this is a situation that is very dire, and I feel is not being treated with the proper level of enormity that we are facing with this virus.
not that the stock market holds much value to how economic growth is really, but look at how much the stock market crashed after the announcement of the Omicron variant.
Exactly.
Because it dropped a lot.
Yeah. And
just because of out of fear of going into another lockdown.
And what I fear is that Omicron is not the last.
Oh, for sure it's not.
If anything, Delta was like the first horseman of the apocalypse that showed up. Omicron is like the second.
If conservative stupidity continues to flourish in our country, we are definitely going to see more variants because of this.
This may be a little weird of a comparison, maybe inappropriate, but I think it's apt. Omicron could be to us what Absol is to Pokemon. The thing that you see before disaster. Like, honestly, it could be the thing that we see that is it's the thing that we see and we realize we're fucked.
Yeah.
And I know this segment has been very, very doomer, but I genuinely am afraid for what can happen with this virus getting worse. And the only things that we can do to prevent this is, please, for the love of God, for the love of all things that you feel may be holy or unholy or sacred or whatever, get vaccinated if you have not. Please.
Definitely sign up for the booster shot as well. With the new variants coming out, the efficacy of the vaccine has been dropping, so definitely sign up for the booster shot. Also, please consider wearing masks again. I know they are uncomfortable, but that's something we have to do because this is only the second variant of concern that we've gotten from the WHO.
Yes, and mind you, this doesn't mean there's only been 2 variants total. There have been numerous variants that have been happening that just aren't reported on because they aren't worse.
They aren't.
But they are there, and that means the potential for more is always there. And reminder that we are learning about the Omicron variant, I think at the tail end of November, now early December, when in reality Omicron existed 1 month ago. And we are just now learning about it. Which means, even now, there could be another variant that is already there that is worse than Omicron that we have yet to discover, but is currently infecting the population.
Yeah. Now, do you want to talk about the conservative hysteria around Omicron?
Yes. I feel that if we're going to be talking about the dangers of this, we also need to debunk a lot of conspiracism and a lot of misinformation that's currently being spread, if you want to start with that.
Yeah. The easy one. People are going on like, what is Omicron? Omicron was just made up to sound scary. I know I joked before about Omicron sounding scary, and they chose the worst possible Greek numeric letter, but for those of you who don't know, yes, it is a Greek letter.
It's no different than how we name storms after names of people.
And the funny thing is like, they think that they made it up. Like, they just chose the like, honestly, what did you do choosing the scariest sounding one to perpetuate this nonsense? But they think just because of how scary it sounds that they made up just to incite some sort of fear-mongering.
Yeah.
And then the next one is, of course, the idea that, oh, it's convenient that a new variant pops up right on time for the economy to plummet.
And here's the thing. When it comes to viruses, there are no coincidences. It happens. And let's be honest here. We know why the variants are happening now. Holidays. There are many holidays in many different cultures around the world that are happening now. And people want to travel and see each other. Last year, many people missed seeing their families during these events. And so this year, they really want to make it up. Unfortunately, because of the fact that many of the people that are doing this are not vaccinated, or they haven't gotten the booster, or just simply they were unfortunate enough to be breakthrough,
Yeah.
It means that we're spreading. And here in the United States, we just had Thanksgiving. And while for my family personally, we did not have anyone travel from the out of state, I know many families did. And unfortunately,
it's a huge part of American culture that we all congregate as like familial units to celebrate Thanksgiving, and a lot of families do that out of state.
yeah. And I mean, we're coming up on Christmas, we're coming up on New Year's, we're
And
coming up on
and
Hanukkah,
Christmas is probably
Kwanzaa,
even worse when it comes to people vacationing out of state.
because at least Thanksgiving is an American-centric holiday. Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, New Year's, and other holiday events around this time become damn near universal.
Yeah, because like it's pretty much like December is distinguished as like the holiday month.
Yeah.
So no matter what religion you practice, or if you're atheist and practice Christmas, like
or just not even practicing Christmas, any other form of holiday that happens around this time,
it is the main catalyst for travel during this time period.
And a lot of that travel is done via air travel or train travel.
Yeah.
Both of which are areas that have people in contained spaces where they are potentially able to infect each other. I don't know if people travel by boat. I don't think people travel by boat anymore.
People will take cruise ships for the vacation.
They'll take cruise ships for the vacation,
which is a massive hub for people to gather and spread viruses. Of course, the one that comes to mind is the Diamond Princess.
Yes. And unfortunately, there's a double-edged sword with this. On one hand, it is terrible that if people are on cruise ships and they're spreading it. But on the other hand, there are countries that rely on tourism as their main mode of making money. Entire countries are determined, their entire economies are determined by tourists and tourist traffic. So, we stop tourism, other countries start failing, more so than they already are. But if we continue with it, we are spreading this virus internationally.
Yeah.
And so it is a beyond messy and complicated situation, and it is not convenient in any way. This is just showing how interconnected the world truly is, and how we are not that separate from each other like we think we are. That the things that affect people across the globe somehow don't affect us is a lie. Yeah. I mean, this virus started in Northern Europe and was discovered as actually, not this virus, this variant originated in Northern Europe but wasn't detected until it hit the southern part of Africa. Tells you a lot about how interconnected we really are.
Yeah, which also makes me scared about the incubation period of this new variant.
Exactly.
Because we don't know that yet.
Yeah, we don't.
Because I don't remember if there was an incubation period change between the original and Delta.
I don't believe so.
I don't think so, but that could change with this one.
Exactly. I mean, the fact of the matter is that...
Because, for all we know, this incubation period could be shortened to 1 week, as compared to 2 weeks of the original. And imagine how much damage that will do.
Exactly. Because the other thing with holidays is that a lot of people spend around a week.
Yeah.
They spend around a week because Christmas is only 1 week away from what is known mostly around the world and agreed upon to be the start of the new year, being the 1st of January, being 1 week after the 25th of December. So a lot of people do stay in the areas that they are for Christmas and New Year's, meaning the potentiality for spread is even higher. Especially because with New Year's, it's going to be big. People are wanting to go out again.
Because not people traveling out of state, but people traveling in their own communities.
Exactly.
So you'll have massive travel to other states, and then those people will then congregate back home and interact with their coworkers, their nuclear family, their just...
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't even go far. I wouldn't even stop at states. It's countries.
Yeah.
People come from across the world to congregate with their families during these events because they're two very huge cultural almost universal cultural
Like,
events.
despite, like, at this point, Christmas is pretty much and not really a Christian holiday anymore.
I mean,
It's pretty much because
it never was. The Christmas as we know it was never necessarily a Christian holiday,
which is
but
why it's so universal.
yeah, because of the fact that it's so commodified.
Yeah.
But even then, even if you don't have following Christmas, you have other religions that are also around this time.
Yeah.
So
the universality of these holidays is going to cause a mass spread of the Omicron variant.
yeah, which really, God. I mean, what else is there to say?
Yeah. The only thing there is to say is get your booster shots.
Get your booster shots and get vaccinated if you haven't already, and talk to family and friends about getting these things if they haven't already.
Because you may think, oh, they're conservative, they're not going to listen to me. Honestly, if you make a good enough case and show compassion, you will be able to convince anyone who is not Q adjacent to get this vaccine.
And even then, even if that doesn't work, you can always threaten them with this, and please do so as a last resort. And if you are able to do so financially, cut yourself off from these people until they get vaccinated. That is something that works. Peer pressure and the potentiality of social isolation from the ones you love can be a strong motivating factor for people to just bite the bullet and get vaccinated. I don't recommend doing this as your first option. I recommend this as a last resort, and only if you can financially afford to do this, cutting yourself off from unvaccinated members of your family or friends that refuse to get vaccinated. It is a last resort. Please do not use this as your first resort, as it can go very badly.
And one thing else that needs to be said is, even if this happens to break through the vaccine, it is still imperative that you get it. Because Delta has been able to break through somewhat, but at the same time, people who have taken the vaccine are not dying at the same rate as the unvaccinated population.
And
so even
you also have to remember that just because Delta and Omicron broke through doesn't change the fact that there are minor variants of COVID still.
Yeah. So getting this vaccine will help your fight in surviving this pandemic. Even if the virus breaks through, you are a lot less likely to die if you catch it.
Yeah. Do you think that's everything you wanted to bring up?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Well, I think that wraps up that segment.